Good morning. It is Wednesday, the 1st of April. I'm Maeve McMahon and this is Europe Today, your daily catch-up of European news and context, live here on Euronews. Coming up, the President of the European Council has called for urgent de-escalation and respect for international law in the ongoing war in the Middle East. After a phone call with the Iranian President, Antonio Costa said the protection of civilians and critical infrastructure was vital. This as neighbourhoods of Tehran were bombed last night and 7 people were killed in Beirut. Meanwhile, the US President Donald Trump warns allies to, quote, go get your own oil, expressing frustration over what he sees as a lack of support in efforts to reopen the Iran-controlled Strait of Hormuz. We'll speak exclusively to Poland's Minister of State for Energy. But first, residents in Dubai have been taking shelter from explosions not witnessed since the start of the conflict. In the past few weeks, the US-Israel war on Iran has wiped $120 billion off stock markets in the United Arab Emirates, while tens of thousands of flights have been cancelled in one of the world's busiest transit hubs. For the latest, we can cross now to Dubai and bring in Euronews' correspondent, Jane Witherspoon. Good morning, Jane. So we've seen actually US stocks jump last night after Iran said it was willing to perhaps end the war. But meanwhile, Iran is attacking Gulf countries intensively. So what exactly should we read into all this?
Well, as you mentioned, good morning. The war in Iran has completely shaken up the global financial markets. There are global campaigns and efforts to calm this, trying to keep those oil prices from exploding upwards, from stocks from falling, and interest rates from surging. As you mentioned, yesterday, the US had their best day in nearly a year. And as you mentioned as well, also, the UAE has basically been some of the hardest hit the markets here from the fallout of the war, wiping, as you said, $120 billion there. There is confidence it will bounce back. The financial markets in Qatar and Bahrain have also dropped about 4% and 7% respectively. Meanwhile, exchanges in Saudi Arabia and Oman have seen gains.
And meanwhile, Jane, what's the latest in Dubai where you are after those explosions yesterday?
Yes, we had a very intense day yesterday of several attacks here across the UAE and Dubai. A residential building in Dubai South was hit by debris, resulting in 4 people being injured. We had a fire at a deserted house in the Al Badar region. Debris from a falling drone also hit the facade in central Dubai, and as well a Kuwaiti tanker was the target of an attack off the coast of Dubai. Of course, we've had jets ramping up once again overnight. There's not a lot of sleep happening here. And of course, all eyes are looking towards this evening, where the IRGC, they have issued a warning issued a threat saying that they're going to target 18 tech companies across the Gulf, saying that they're going to commence those attacks at 8 p.m. Tehran time. Those targets include some of the biggest US tech firms, Microsoft, Google and Apple. So, of course, there are a lot of people waiting to see what today and tonight brings.
OK, Jane Witherspoon, thank you so much for that update. And we're also waiting to hear what President Trump has to say. He'll be giving a press conference later on the ongoing war in Iran. So stay tuned to hear if there is any end in sight to this. But now, moving on, EU foreign affairs ministers, except the Hungarian minister, are in Kyiv, pledging to ensure, quote, full accountability for the war crimes Russia is accused of committing in the past 4 years. For more on their visit that started in Bucha, the city outside Kyiv, known for the massacre back in March 2022, we spoke to the Romanian Foreign Minister Oana Toy from Kyiv.
Yes, we have visited together Bucha, also commemorating the victims, but in the same time being witnesses to this moment of resilience and how Ukrainians have taken back occupied territory, have liberated Bucha that has been under Russian occupation with terrible war crimes. We have seen and heard stories of civilians that were simply crossing the streets, of children that were killed under Russian occupation. 400 children were kidnapped and have recently returned to the Ukrainian community. And here, the common effort to return kidnapped children back to their families, back into the community if their family did not survive that part of the war. This is something extremely important.
We saw President Zelensky travelling over in Saudi Arabia, looking elsewhere for financial support, given that 90 billion loan is still on hold. Is the relationship then a little bit awkward today because of this?
I wouldn't use that word in any sense. It's a good relationship. It's a strong partnership. And of course, we need better instruments inside the European Union also to have faster decisions. But in terms of the Middle East and the relationship between Ukraine and Middle East, we have visited this morning defense facilities, and we have seen also interceptors that are built in Ukraine to counter Shahed drones, the Iranian, Russian drones that have been used in Ukraine and that are used in Ukraine, but also that are currently used in the Middle East. So what we see is something that myself and my colleagues have said for a long time, which is the fact that conflicts around the world are interconnected. And it is very important now that we also use the expertise gained through the resilience in this war by Ukraine. Also on Romania's side, for example, we have planned to build together a drone facility in Romania. This has been part of the agreements between President Volodymyr Zelensky and President Nicu Jordan 2 weeks ago in the Romanian visit.
Now, you're there physically today, but not all foreign affairs ministers from the European Union are there. What does that say about united EU support for Ukraine?
Well, some of the European foreign affairs ministers that are not here today have had previous bilateral visits. So it depends on how the schedules are in different countries. There are countries where, for example, we've just had elections and you have a caretaking government. But I would reconfirm the fact that the European Union support is strong and will continue to be that. And of course, for us as a country bordering the war, having 650 kilometers of the border, it is also very important that we move ahead with decisions such as not to allow Russian war combatants in the future to gain Schengen visas, to go ahead with the common investments at the border. For example, we're now building a highway that connects part of Romania with Chernivtsi, the Ukrainian region, with a strong Romanian-speaking minority, and this is part of the SAFE financing instrument, which is the European instrument, as you know, to help us build better capacity, not just in terms of defense procurement, but also dual use.
Oh, Anatolia there, the Romanian Minister of Foreign Affairs speaking to me from Ukraine. Now, moving on, Israel has been criticised by the European Union and the United Nations for reinstating capital punishment for Palestinians convicted of murdering Israelis, a practice associated with non-democratic countries or democracies in decline. Many Israeli opposition lawmakers and Israeli citizens have been taking to the streets to protest. Our Jakob Yanis tells us more.
It is a seismic shift in Israeli law. On Monday, Knesset approved the death penalty for Palestinians convinced of murdering Israelis. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu backed the measure, and far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir celebrated the vote wearing a pin shaped like a noose on his lapel. And the topic is very serious, so your reporter wants to look past the political theatre and see the facts. Under the new rules, anyone convinced of a fatal terror attack faces a default punishment of death by hanging. And it applies by default in military courts. However, these courts only try Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. The law also applies in civilian courts, but there is a catch. The attacker must act with the intention to put an end to the state of Israel. And legal experts say this exact wording protects Jewish citizens from the same punishment. The Palestinian Authority stresses Israel has absolutely no sovereignty over Palestinian land, whereas supporters of the bill say the country must fight a cycle of terror. But there is a question. Will this law stop the violence? You see, the death penalty is banned across the EU. And the UK, France, Germany and Italy say the policy has zero deterring effect and called it de facto discriminatory. And now Brussels is stepping in. Euronews has seen an exclusive draft statement from EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, who calls the bill a grave regression. It marks a noticeably sharper tone from Europe towards Israel. Yet, diplomacy aside, the core problem comes down to the law itself. If a justice system seems to use two different sets of rules for the exact same crime, can one still call it justice?
Now, today is April the 1st, a day for playing April Fool jokes on each other. But this next story is no laughing matter. Just 12 or 11 days ahead of general elections in Hungary, a new leak shows the Hungarian Foreign Affairs Minister, Peter, discussing EU-sanctioned dodging with Russia's Foreign Affairs Minister, Sergei Lavrov. Poland and Ireland have called the move, quote, repulsive, sinister and unacceptable. For more, we're joined here on set by Euronews' Hungarian correspondent, Sándor Zsíros. Sándor, just tell us what exactly happened and why is this so significant?
Good morning, Maeve. Indeed, this recorded conversation shows a call between Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. The conversation happened back in 2024. We don't know who recorded it, but it was published by an investigative portal, The Insider. Now, about the content, it shows how Lavrov convinced Szijjártó to act for Russian interest and to try to remove one Russian woman from the EU's sanctions list. She's a sister of a Russian oligarch. Szijjártó accepted this request and he was saying he will work on this. And indeed, 6 months later, this woman has been removed from the EU's sanctions list. Now, Szijjártó is well known for his close Russian ties, and it's also well known that, Hungary is disliking the EU's sanctions policy when it comes to Russia, but the tone of the whole conversation was very casual and it was very striking. Now, what the impact of this conversation and of this leak, this is happening during the final phase of the Hungarian electoral campaign, and one of the big topics at these elections is the ties with Russia. And Hungarian opposition leader Péter Magyar is attacking the government with especially this. He is saying what Szijjártó did is a betrayal of the Hungarian interest, is a betrayal of the European interest. Now let's listen to the conversation.
Look, I am calling on the request of Alisher, and he just asked me to remind you that you were doing something about his sister.
Mrs. Ismailova?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is the following, that together with the Slovaks, we are submitting a proposal to the European Union to delist her. We will submit it next week. And as the new review period is going to be started, it's going to be put on the agenda. And we will do our best in order to get her off.
Thank you very much. He would be really very pleased. He is seriously concerned about his sister. You can understand this. And we highly appreciate your support and your fight for equality.
And you can read more of Sándor's reporting and our Hungarian desk reporting on Euronews.com. Thank you, Sándor. And now for the mood in Hungary, just days, as I said, away from these crucial parliamentary elections, our correspondent in Hungary, Adam Mayer, sent us this update.
There are less than 2 weeks left until next Sunday's Hungarian election, which promises to be the closest in the past 20 years. It's no wonder we are seeing a campaign as intense as the country hasn't seen in a long time. Unlike in previous campaigns, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has embarked on a tour of the country, delivering speeches to thousands of people night after night in squares like this one in Szolnok, a city 100 kilometers from Budapest. Orbán's main challenger, Péter Magyar, is also touring the country, but he appears at 4 or 5 locations a day, drawing often similar crowds as the Prime Minister. In recent days, reports emerged that counter-protesters have appeared at Viktor Orbán's speeches, where they were harassed by people dressed in black and were not protected by the police. It remains to be seen if similar or even more intense events will take place in the last days of the campaign.
Adam Mayer there for us. Now, after talks in Brussels, EU energy ministers have so far not published any concrete proposals to address the energy crisis, but the Commission will present EU-level measures very soon. For more, we can speak to Bronisław Bruckner, the Polish Secretary of State in the Energy Ministry, who was actually inside the very meeting. Good morning and thanks for joining us. Just tell us, what did you decide? Because here in Brussels, they're starting to tell people to start working from home, not take urgent flights and drive less. Is this scaremongering, or what was really the mood inside that meeting?
Good morning and thanks for having me. Basically, in Poland, we have already taken some measures. We have decided to introduce the legislation that is basically introducing price caps on fuels in Poland. and also decreases excise tax and VAT. But in Brussels, we are still discussing. So basically, we have been discussing different approaches, but basically the voices that were heard the most were about need to act, need to react quickly. And of course, different ministers were presenting different approaches. Poland was focusing more on the need of urgent measures to be taken in the EU ETS system.
So who should be taking charge here? Because people are very worried. Should it be EU capitals introducing measures like reducing speed limits or encouraging public transport? Or should the EU be coming here with a coordinated response?
I do believe that basically we need a coordinated response to the crisis, but the capitals should be driving the measures. Basically, we need certain flexibility. Of course, it's easier in countries when people are using bikes to go to works to somehow encourage them to use bikes. But in Warsaw. Now it's better with the weather, but in February you cannot bike to work. That's the issue.
Indeed, of course, people are looking for realistic measures too. Thank you so much for joining us this morning here on Euronews. Now, moving on, Pope Leo is preparing to celebrate Easter for the first time as pontiff 1 year after his predecessor's death, as concerns grow over the Middle East war. The Irish MEP Barry Andrews has an audience with the Pope today and joins us now for Rome. Good morning, Barry. Just tell us, what are your expectations for this encounter, and is there anything the Pope can do to call for calm now in the Middle East?
Hi, good morning, Maeve. Thanks for having me on. Yes, I mean, he has been a very strong moral voice for peace and for dialogue in the Middle East and elsewhere around the world. So clearly I'll be raising that issue with him and thanking him for his moral leadership. But I'll also be raising with him the massive cuts in development and humanitarian aid that are happening in Europe, and encouraging him to support a narrative which acknowledges it's not all about investment in infrastructure. A lot of it is about providing humanitarian aid for people affected by conflict. He was in Lebanon himself in November. I was there a couple of weeks ago myself, and I've seen for myself the human cost of these massive cuts in humanitarian aid in terms of the types of services that are provided for people that are internally displaced in Lebanon. So it's a huge privilege for me to be able to share a few moments with him. His first document as a major document focused on poverty and inequality. And he will therefore hopefully encourage European leaders to focus on that as well.
And meanwhile, Barry Andrews, we've seen that the former Irish EU Commissioner Mairead McGuinness has been appointed as the EU's new special envoy for religious freedom. What does that actually mean? What will this role entail of?
Well, I'm not across exactly what Mairead's role will be. She's a personal friend of mine. I'm delighted for her and that she's recovered from recent illness. But clearly, humanitarian aid is neutral. It's faith neutral. And what the European Union seeks to do is to provide for anybody, wherever they are affected by conflict or climate or any catastrophe, with impartial and neutral assistance wherever that can happen. Nevertheless, I'm glad that Mairead will have that role, because there is growing both anti-Semitism across Europe, there's Islamophobia as well across Europe, and there's an intolerance of Christian minorities in some parts of the developing world. So it's important that somebody as senior as Mairead would take that role.
OK. Barry Andrews, Irish MEP there from Renew Europe, just ahead with his moment there with the Pope. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on Euronews. And thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, with this week being Holy Week and the EU institutions going a little bit into shutdown for a couple of days, Europe Today is also taking a little break. We'll be back, though, next Tuesday with a fresh news show. In the meantime, for anyone celebrating Easter, enjoy, take care, and see you very soon here on Euronews, and of course on Euronews.com for more news, more analysis and more insights onto all the stories we're covering for you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.